Good morning. This is Dr. Rudolph Lurz. Welcome to Lurzday Thursday. This is my podcast. I try to do it at least once a month. Started off as once a week. That's a lot for somebody who works full time, but I try to reach out at least once a month to provide some thoughts and feedback on all the things that I see happening in the world and news and analysis that I think is helpful. So, a note, normally I have a very specific format with dad jokes and quote analysis and some views of different news events and different things going on in the arts and TV and film, television and film, and literature. Today is going to be more focused on 2 or 3 specific events that are major events that we are dealing with right now in world news. So I have a doctorate in administrative and policy studies from the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a debate coach at the private school where I teach, and we've had some success in the state tournament. We've won the state tournament once, finished 3rd last year. Hoping to do well this year. So I thought I would analyze the events going on in Iran, in the Gulf region, along with Artemis II. So 2 very different vibes here. 2 very different events. So, let's get started. Just got a Lockbee journal. I don't have any advertisers. I don't even edit. I don't have the technical expertise to edit. So, what you see is the first cut, the live version, as live as it can be, even though it's taped, because I just put the whole thing up in one single upload. So any thoughts I have come strictly from things that I have found cool. And I do find this cool. It's a pocket journal. It can fit a little notebook, pen, can even hold a passport. So I found myself, let me see if I can get the right passport here. I got all my family's passports in one spot. There's my passport. Let's see. It's said that they could hold the passport. Let's see. I know it can hold a pen and my business card. Oh man, it does. Look at that. Passport fits directly into the pocket. Can this thing still zip up underneath? Oh yeah. Perfect. Look at that. So I found myself, that's really useful. This is rambling a little bit. My late father was a journalist, and he taught me to always carry a pen and always carry some paper to write with. I've been falling away from that lately with smartphones, as have many of my peers. And I like to think that I'm not tied to my phone so heavily, but I was getting more and more tied to my phone. So this provides me space to just decompress, downtime, to jot down some quick thoughts, to review some other thoughts that I've had previously, to write, because it's always on my person. It could fit in my back pocket or my jacket pocket. So I was skeptical of it, but I really appreciate it now. So, shout out to Lockbee this week for something cool that is keeping me off of my phone, just randomly doing that. Instead, I can randomly write. My handy dandy notebook. To quote Blue's Clues, one of my daughter's shows. So I'd like to start off this segment of Lurzday Thursday with a throwback to a previous quote. So I start each day off. I could take my passport out of, back to the desk drawer. Don't need to carry the passport around. So I start my podcast off typically with a quote. And back at the beginning of the year, one of my podcasts opened up with a quote from Machiavelli, which noted that wars begin when you will, but do not end when you please. That turned out to be rather prescient. Wars begin when you will, but do not end when you please. You have the initiative to start a war, to start a conflict, to start an argument, to start a fight. Whenever you choose. That's something that you control. You do not have the capacity or the crystal ball to determine when that ends. And we are discovering that now with this latest conflict in the Gulf region, where we launched devastating strikes against Iran that knocked out a lot of their capacity, but it didn't end their capacity. And now we're trying to find a way out, and it's a lot more awkward to get out of a conflict than it is to start one. So wars begin when you will, but do not end when you please. So I want to throw back to that quote to open this analysis of things that are occurring in that conflict with Iran, and really a discussion of confirmation bias, of people in the room that you need to have in that room who have the courage to tell you no. When you're at the highest echelons of any organization or country for that matter, or government, you need to have someone to tell it to you straight, to provide concrete analysis, and to have enough people in that room so you know when to not follow through with something that you want to do. Telling the most powerful person in the room, whether that person is a president or a CEO, is a challenging thing to do, especially when they are leaning heavily toward doing one thing. In this case, striking Iran. So, my quote today comes from someone who lived in Iran in the 1200s, so a long time ago, about 800 years, thereabouts. That was Musli ad-Din Sadi. I probably mispronounced that, so my apologies. I'm not an expert on how to pronounce that name. Musli ad-Din Sadi, very famous thinker and writer. And this quote really speaks to what's going on right now and what we should have done here in the United States. When you see contention amongst your enemies, go and sit at ease with your friends. But when you see them of one mind, string your bow and place stones upon the ramparts. When you see contention amongst your enemies, go and sit at ease with your friends. But when you see them of one mind, string your bow and place stones upon the ramparts. Now, before we initiated this war against Iran, they were certainly in that first category. Iran's not the most stable country. I will concede this point. The Iranian regime funds terrorism. They oppress their people. They stifle dissent. They torture and kill anyone who practices dissent and who speaks out against the regime. They have killed Americans. They are not a good regime. There's not good people who are leading, or who were at least, leading that regime. They've done terrible things. And I am willing to bet, to quote The West Wing, one of my favorite shows, I'm willing to bet all the money in my pocket and all the money in your pocket, dear viewer, that every single U.S. president has wanted to put on a red tie and announce to the nation that we have launched strikes against Iran. I'm willing to bet all the money in my pocket and all the money in your pocket that these presidents have likely received briefings on how to launch those strikes and the pros and cons of launching strikes against Iran. Because here's the thing, when you practice terrorism, when you are a danger to regional and international security through seeking nuclear weapons, when you consistently shout death to America and death to Israel in the streets of your capital, there's always going to be a reason to launch a strike on your country. There's always a reason to do this against Iran, with this present Iranian regime in power. They're an authoritarian regime that presents a severe risk and a severe threat to regional and international security. They have funded terrorism. Not good folks. So I guarantee you that every U.S. president since Carter has at one time had some general present, or some national security advisor, or some secretary of defense present them with a binder of all the different options available to them, both military and diplomatic and economic. And I know that there have been occasions where President Obama, where President George W. Bush, probably President Trump in his first term, President Biden has wanted to put on a red tie, launch a strike, and slap them down when they have stepped out of line and have done terrible things. The want, the desire to use your tremendous military capacity to ensure security for your allies in the region and to hit the adversary who has openly called for your demise and who has killed Americans, I understand the want to do it. But why have all these other presidents, including President Trump, has probably wanted to do this before? That same bet applies. He is a previous president as well as the current president. And I'm guessing in his first time, I'm almost certain his first term, there has been a time where he's wanted to hit him. Every American president has likely had their finger on that button before. But all of them, including President Trump, have managed to not do it. Why? What has changed? Why now? And what stopped all these previous presidents from hitting that button and ordering that strike? Not just a limited strike, which has been done. President Trump did that in his first term as well. I'm not talking limited strikes. I'm talking an all-out assault, trying to take out the Ayatollah himself. What stopped us? Restraint and critical thinking and an analysis of the situation. Because the threat of force, the threat of overwhelming force, was deemed to be a better tool to hold in reserve than one to deploy. So let's talk about a few analyses associated with that. Going back to Saudi's quote, "When you see contention amongst your enemies, go and sit at ease with your friends. But when you see them of one mind, string your bow and place stones upon the ramparts." The Iranian regime just killed thousands of dissenters in widespread protest. The economic sanctions against Iran are working. The Ayatollah was old. Not just old, incredibly old. Makes former President Joe Biden look like a middle-aged man. Late 80s. Super old. Really, really old. And losing his grip on power. With the widespread protest, even like the Iranian people are brave. Man, they're brave. To stand up and go take to the streets knowing the consequences and the inevitable crackdowns that would occur in that authoritarian regime. And they did it anyways. So we have an ancient leader looking like the crypt keeper, super old. The Iranian people getting more organized in their dissent. And with this old leader, the succession is not clear. Most of the elites in the army and in the political ruling class in Iran did not want the Ayatollah's son to take power because they are so firmly against this any view of hereditary succession. They didn't want the Ayatollah's son to take power. He's not exactly the most inspirational leader. He's more of a bureaucrat. He's not the guy. So what's the right move here? They want a nuclear weapon. They've wanted a nuclear weapon for some time. Every member of the U.S. government in both the Democratic and the Republican parties recognizes that that's not a good thing. So the debate is how to stop them from getting one. And all these other U.S. presidents of Republican and Democratic parties have all come to the same conclusion, that economic and diplomatic pressure were better tools, and the threat of overwhelming force was a better tool to keep them from stepping too far out of line, knowing that they would get smacked down hard if they move too far outside the lines. And I think that definitely was the better choice here in spring 2026 on how to deal with Iran. From my position as a policy analyst and a scholar and a debate coach, it's the one that made the most sense with the evidence at hand. Because the Strait of Hormuz is a critical choke point for so much of the world's oil and trade. And before this conflict, it was open. And it was going to stay open because Iran knew that if they attempted to pull any shenanigans in that strait, that's when the bombs would fall. So the Strait of Hormuz was open. Iran's nuclear ambitions were in progress, but we had substantially already dented those with previous devastating strikes, and those strikes were limited in nature, and they functioned to slow down their path and eliminate access to the technology and the infrastructure needed to build a nuclear weapon. So, you have an ancient leader looking like the Crypt Keeper in his late 80s. When he died of natural causes, there would have been a power struggle to fill that vacuum. And it's unlikely the Ayatollah's son would have been the one to fill that role. That's the moment in that period to discreetly, using human intelligence, put your thumb on the scale. Covert measures, cloak and dagger sort of thumb on the scale measures to try to tilt it toward more democratic rule, more of an actual republic than an authoritarian regime. And as Saudi said, when you see contention among your enemies, go and sit at ease with your friends. So when Iran, which is already struggling, when the Ayatollah inevitably was going to die in the next year or 2 years or 3 years, it was going to be soon because the man is ancient. Old dude, not in good health. But Venezuela, I think, gave the president some overconfidence. Because Venezuela, he, using the resources that we had, swooped in, took the leader of Venezuela out of his bed, and brought him to New York City to put him on trial for narco-terrorism charges. Pretty easy. It went seamlessly. So he's thinking in his head, President Trump is thinking, I did this in Venezuela. Wouldn't it be great if I could just do that to Iran? If we could get a leader who believed in a democratic republic, who provides some freedom to the people who have been long oppressed, to eliminate a regime that has killed Americans and funded terrorism for decades. Wouldn't that be great if I could just do exactly what I did in Venezuela? Just swoop in, knock out the head, and then pet a bunny rabbit instead of a snake. Great. But what happens if you don't hit that very low percentage shot? So, President Trump is a golfer. If I was in that room with him, I would use a golf metaphor to describe the two situations. Venezuela was a drivable par 4. So here's a scenario. In order to obtain your objectives, you need to eagle a par 4. That's a very hard shot in golf. You need to get a 2 on a par 4. So essentially you need to drive the green and then sink the putt. Venezuela was a drivable par 4. There's a lot of corruption in Venezuela. We obviously had some key intelligence assets within the inner circle of the Venezuelan leader. And using those assets, we knew exactly where he was. We knew exactly how to get him. We knew exactly what to do to swoop in and go get him. And additionally, the capacity of Venezuela to defend itself is much lower than that of Iran. The Venezuelan military does not have nearly the status of the Iranian military. Iran has a lot more capacity and a lot more ability to hurt us than Venezuela did, especially with missiles. So Venezuela is a drivable par 4. There's not a lot of trees. There's not a lot of water that's in play. And it's not President Trump who's trying to drive that 270-yard par 4 with a fairly open green and fairway. Matt, like with our military capacity, that's like Bryson DeChambeau's power and the accuracy of, I don't know, who's a really accurate golfer? Harris English. Keegan Bradley's known for his accuracy. Tom Watson, accurate golfer. So you have that kind of power and incredible accuracy, and you're looking at a 270-yard par 4. Yeah, drove the green, made a very simple putt, and you're done. You're out. Great. But here's the issue of Iran, with the Strait of Hormuz right there, with all their missile capacity, with all of our allies, with very vulnerable populations. Dubai is a city full of millionaires and skyscrapers right across the street from Iran, essentially. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar. All these allies are right there and in range of missiles and drones from Iran. So I would have told the president this: all right, look, you can try to take out the Ayatollah. You can try to win this war in 48 hours or 2 weeks. And it might work. But this is not a 270-yard par 4. This is a 350 or 380-yard par 4. It's drivable. You could potentially hit that green, but that green is tiny. That green is small, surrounded by bunkers and waste areas. You got a ton of water that's in play on the left. And if you even slightly, in your attempt to drive that green, hit it too far left with too much follow through, then it's going to wind up in the water. And if you don't drive that green, 2 gigantic redwood trees are going to appear right in front of your ball. There's no way you're going to be able to eagle that hole now. Because now you got 2 redwood trees that have just appeared right in front of your ball, wherever it landed, if it's not on the green. So you're going to land in the water, and you're going to take a penalty, and you're going to be a disaster of a hole like the Bay of Pigs for John F. Kennedy. Or it's not going to end cleanly, and you're going to get into protracted conflict. And if Iran is able to successfully close the Strait of Hormuz, then you're going to get into a really sticky situation. You're not going to be able to get the ball through those trees that just appeared in front of it. So and also, let's say you do drive that green. Now you got to sink the putt. Now you got to get regime change after you knock out the Ayatollah. And that green is full of undulating ridges and hills that it's very hard to read. Venezuela had a corrupt government. People can be bought. You're not going to be able to buy people in Iran. There's some zealots in that government. There's a religious aspect. If you're chanting death to America and death to Israel in the streets, it's going to take more than a few dollars to get people to betray Iran. You're not going to get that same access to the inner circle as you had in Venezuela. So let's just say you do manage to get it onto the green. You got to sink the putt. And you will also have all these non-government actors who are very angry that you hit the ball so far. So you have potentially inspired some terrorists in your homeland to commit attacks against synagogues and churches and bars. We saw that in Austin, Texas, right after we launched the attacks on Iran. And all of these cyber actors are going to hack all your systems, because Iran does have a very capable cyber division that can launch cyber attacks against our biggest companies, our infrastructure. So if you tee up and hit that drive, you got to hit the perfect shot to make the green. You got to make the putt. If you miss, it's bad. If you make it, if you hit the green, it could be bad, because there are going to be people who are mad that you hit the green. So the only way to win, in the words of war games, the only way to win is not to play that game. Because now the Iranian military is aware that they can effectively close the Strait of Hormuz with mines, with drones, with missiles, and keep anybody from going through it. So now, like before this conflict, there was no closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Now they're talking about having a toll booth in place, which completely goes against all of the maritime laws of the sea that we have established in the last 3 centuries. All right, where are the line in the Marines hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli? One of the earliest actions of the U.S. Marines was to knock out the Barbary pirates who were extorting anybody who wanted to trade on the open seas and exacting a charge for that, paying tribute to them. And we said, heck no, we're going to go in there and knock them out. Because they attempted to close maritime trade routes on the seas, and charge extortionary fees to anybody who wanted to do that, anyone who wanted to just pass through. So now all of a sudden, 3 centuries of trade law is out the window, and we're talking about establishing tolls just because you've proven that you can, through mines and through drones and missiles, you can effectively close the strait? Man. We showed them their capacity. And now there's a leader in place who's lost his father, who's lost his wife in the opening airstrikes. Gas prices are through the roof here. Political dissensions is at a boiling point, because you don't have the patience to wait for that old man to die over there in Iran. That was the move. If you want to put your thumb on the scale in a limited way that's harder to trace to you, the move is to follow the advice of Saudi from the 1200s and sit at ease with your friends and just use the threat of force to make sure that they didn't step too far out of line. But when you got a room full of people with confirmation bias, who are told, who have seen what happens to those who speak up against the president, man, not a good result. Not a good result in any case. Apparently, J.D. Vance was against this conflict and tried. So thank you, Vice President Vance. Thank you for trying. But we needed more people in that room to put it in simple enough terms, using metaphors that President Trump would understand, that this was not the right play. This was not the right play. So you're seeing a lot of tragedy unfold. There's a very fragile ceasefire in place right now, but it's already fraying because Israel is striking Lebanon. And we trying to say, like, that doesn't involve the two of us. And they're saying, well, it does. And that's, man, it's not a very nuanced and intellectually agile decision. I love playing a Civilization series of computer games. Sid Meier's Civilization, great games. And I'm sure every one of us fellow gamers who's ever played a game has tried something in the game. And when it doesn't work, you can be like the Kool-Aid man and step back through that wall that you just ran through. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, Mr. Kool-Aid man. Oops, that didn't work. Load game or quit game. When you try a move in a strategy game that fails, you're able to just, well, that wasn't the right decision. Let's just go back and start again. In real life, you can't do that. You can't hit the reset button. There is no reset button. Wars begin when you will, but do not end when you please. And it's just a stumble, a preventable stumble. I'm a jaded centrist. I'm not a fan of either the present day modern Republican Party or the Democratic Party. I'm a jaded centrist. I'm not a fanatical political zealot who's just has to go for one party or the other. I'm just an analyst here. And speaking from the perspective as an analyst, this was not the right move. It's not like, well, no one could have predicted this would happen. Every other president did. You don't think Obama wanted to put on a red tie and hit Iran? I guarantee you he wanted to do that, and someone told him not to, and he looked at the data and decided not to. George W. Bush, man, he wanted to hit Iran. He called them part of the axis of evil. He hit a lot of other places. He didn't hit there because someone showed him what would happen and what the potential consequences would be. If the juice ain't worth the squeeze, you don't try to make the orange juice. And Trump just like, I made great orange juice in Venezuela. Squeeze. Let's see it happen again. You get that overconfidence. You get that confirmation bias of too many people in the room saying, yeah, go for it. You can do it. The right move was not to do it. That requires restraint. That requires patience. That requires a view that's not based on resultism, and that the move that you make, that the result is truly only due to the moves that you make. Yes, it worked in Venezuela. It could have failed in Venezuela. Ask any golfer. It's hard to hit a par 4 with a driver or a 3-wood. That's hard. It's hard to hit the green and get it on the green, and it's even harder thing to cut the putt and make an eagle. That's a very hard thing, even on a relatively easy hole. He wanted to try to do it on one of the world's more difficult holes to play because he was so confident that he could do it, and he wound up in a mess. So, not so great. And I'm hoping that we find a way out of it. We find a way to peace that doesn't involve bringing back the days of, if anyone can restrict trade, now they're starting to demand a bounty, a tribute, back to the days of the pirates of old. And that's going to force us into more shores of Tripoli in the future, if the free trade of the 7 seas is indeed impeded. Because now precedent has been set that if you're a bad actor and you show that you can close a waterway, that shouldn't be cause to reward you with money. Now there could be, that might be one of the ways to peace now, but it's not a good one for the future of the world. So we're in a mess, an avoidable mess, and we should have just used economic pressure, used sanctions, used diplomacy, used isolation. If they're teetering, don't give them reason to unify. And the second that we failed to secure true regime change on day one, now we turned that ancient old crypt keeper Ayatollah into a martyr, and the people are more united, and the political leaders are more united. They could have been fighting each other for control of Iran. Instead, they're united. And now it's our job, as Saudi noted, to string our bows and put stones upon the ramparts. And it could have been avoided. So, switching to good news. I have loved watching Artemis II. It's great for humanity to use space technology. When we invest in exploration and in space, we get benefits that aren't easily traceable. That was one of the main points of my dissertation research, is that innovation is not a straight line. Policy actors like being able to say, I invested in this and we got this. But with any investment in STEM education and technology, it's not as straight of a line, and that's okay. You shouldn't have to prove the straight, direct line in between investment and ROI. If you get a bigger pie in an unexpected area as a result. And space technology is one of those where you put in some investment and you get unexpected results, like smartphone screens. That's can be traced all the way back to space technology and investment. And we have stayed away and been embroiled in our own internal earthly conflicts for so long that we lost sight of the unifying nature of a mission to the stars. So to see Artemis II in a planned swing around the far side of the moon, following in the footsteps of Apollo 13, but in a planned way, in the hope of setting a precedent and setting the course for future exploration of outer space, man, this is great. This is amazing stuff. So kudos. 3 cheers for Artemis II. 3 jeers for whoever was in the Situation Room trying to advise the president on what to do with Iran. So Artemis II, huge, huge thumbs up from me. During President Trump's first administration, one of the things that I really appreciated, I'm a jaded centrist, not exactly the biggest fan of President Trump. Not a fan of President Trump, not a fan of the Democratic Party, just like many Americans, shaking my head, just saying, can you all get it right? I've had so many shutdowns where you're just using the pain of Americans as a pawn to advance your various political goals. A pox on both your houses, as Mercutio said in Act 3 of Romeo and Juliet. Not a fan right now of the polarized, toxic political atmosphere in the United States. So, not a particular fan of the president in either his first term or his second term. But one of the things I did like was Space Force. I love the creation of Space Force because I recognize that when you invest in space, when you invest in space technology, the returns, while not predictable, are great. It's a great thing. So I love seeing NASA. I love investment in NASA. I love seeing investment in Space Force. I love that move. So to see Artemis II swing around the moon this week during a particular bad week for news was a positive for me. I loved it. Loved seeing that. And here I am on camera saying, if I were advising President Trump, my next move would be to put some political capital into creating a Space Force Academy. We've got a U.S. Military Academy at West Point. We got the Naval Academy at Annapolis. We got the Air Force Academy. We got the Coast Guard Academy. It's time for a Space Force Academy. And that can be a competitive bids. Cities can bid for that like they did for Amazon's headquarters. That would be a great project that would extend beyond President Trump's term. You could come back when he's left office and be there for the dedication and groundbreaking of that Space Force Academy campus wherever it is built. So, Space Force Academy. And for those who are anti-Space Force, people said the same thing about the Air Force. Said, why do we need the Air Force? Why do we need a separate branch for this? We got the Army Air Corps. We don't need an Air Force. Be part of the Army. Wars and conflict and military technology changes. And the Air Force is a recognition that control the skies, you need your own branch for that. You need your own branch. They deserve their own branch. We needed the Air Force Academy. We needed the Air Force Academy because we needed the Air Force. So to go out and get the Space Force Academy started, break that ground, start the competitive bid process for cities and metro areas and regions and states who would want that in their borders. Then build it. Space Force Academy needs to happen. Just like Artemis II was awesome for humanity and for the United States as well. Good news in a period of bad news. So, thumbs up to Artemis II. And also, thumbs up to Masters Week. I love the Masters. I love golf. If you couldn't tell from my golf metaphor for why we should have sat at ease with our friends and used economic and diplomatic pressures against Iran instead of military force. I love golf. I speak in golf metaphors all the time. If you watch previous podcasts, you'll see me quote Bobby Jones. So, yes to Masters Week. Yes to the Masters theme music playing gently on the piano in my mind from now until Sunday. Love the Masters. And I'm rooting for the old guys. Fred Couples was doing well early. Jose Maria Alfabel, shaking off the rust. One of the first golfers out there. He had a better round than many superstars did. These old guys who know the greens, who know the layout of the course, despite the fact that they can't hit a drive 350 yards, can barely even hit 300, they might only hit it 250. But through their knowledge and their abilities and their experience, they're able to still perform well. Love it. Love the Masters. Don't love confirmation bias. Don't love arrogance. Don't love resultism. As in, if it worked once, it needs to work again. If the result happened and it was a great result, it must have been from my tactics. Not necessarily. If you watch my previous podcast, you'll see the logical fallacy. And I got excited. I get excited about arguing against resultism. The logical fallacy of resultism, thinking that your moves were the reason why you succeeded when things go right, and your moves are the reason why you failed when things go wrong. You could play every single game right, every single move right, and still lose. So, resultism, confirmation bias, and overall arrogance led to bad things. But Artemis II, returning to the stars, return to the moon, and Masters Week's theme songs playing is providing at least a little bit of a solve on what has been a very tough month. And that's what I got for you today. A little different than standard formats, a little analysis of events going on the world stage. And on that, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lurzday Thursday, and may all your Thursdays be Lurzday Thursdays. See you next month. Hopefully things are better. Lurz out.